spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that we're spiritual beings living in a human body, in a human encasement, in a human body. We're spiritual beings living in a human body. Now, sometimes we think our work is to become more spiritual and less human. Ooh, I don't want to be, that's my human side coming out. No, that's not our work. Our work is to integrate the spiritual side and the human side. Because, that human side is so important to us as we experience what's going on the planet. We need our human side. And especially as we want to interact with, that's how we interact with one another. That's how we interact with ourselves, is through our human side. So this integration idea is important. I'm going to do a little series. I'm not sure. The series may end today. It may go next week. It may go for next week after that. But it's a little series on the one thing inside of me and the one thing inside of you that keeps me from and causes me to challenge this integration. The one thing inside of me that keeps me from and causes me to challenge the integration in our life. Now, I'm going to give you some clues as to what it keeps me from and what it causes me to, and we'll see if you can figure out what it is. There's that one thing that's inside of me and inside of you. The one thing that keeps me from celebrating other people's success. It's the one thing that keeps me from initiating an apology when I know I need to apologize. It's the one thing that keeps me from initiating an apology when I've only got 5% of the wrong and somebody else has 95% of the wrong right, but I still can't apologize. It's the one thing that keeps me arguing my point even though after I realize it's not even a good point anymore. It's the one thing that keeps me getting lost. It's the one thing that keeps me from admitting weakness in my life. It's the one thing that keeps me from admitting I need help. I need help with my addiction. I need help with my marriage. I need help with my life. It's the one thing that keeps me from admitting I don't know where I'm going, even though everybody else in the car knows I don't know where I'm going. It's the one thing that keeps me from being honest. It's the one thing that keeps me from learning new things because I want everybody to think I know everything already. It's the one thing that causes me to. It's the one thing that causes me to feel good when other people are failing around me. It's the one thing that powers me up when I should be opening up. It's the one thing that causes me to lie about my past. Lie about my failed marriages in the past. Lie about the fact that I didn't go to college. Lie about the fact that I've been fired in my past. It's the one thing that causes me to always have to have the final word in my life. Anybody know what it is? Pride. Yeah, it's pride. It's pride. It's pride. Some of us call it ego, but it's pride. It's that kind of pride. And it's not the kind of pride that's good pride. The pride that you have pride in your children, or you have pride in your nieces and nephews, or you have pride in your work, or you have pride in your artwork, or you have pride in your cooking, or you have that kind of pride, or your company. Not that kind of pride. It's that yucky kind of pride. It's that pride that C.S. Lewis says. He says that drunkenness, greed, and anger are mere flea bites compared to pride. And the pride itself is what causes us to do all of the things in life we don't want to be doing anymore. Some of us call those character defects. Pride is what causes us to keep those character defects just going and going and going and going. It's what causes us to keep those mistakes, those thoughts, those limitation thoughts going in our life. Those are our pride thoughts in our life. And it's yucky. Now, here's the thing. Pride is easy to see in somebody else. You can see it in nanoseconds, can't you? But you look in the mirror and you just don't see it. It's so hard for us to see it in ourselves. And what that means is that there are people in our families, in our workplaces, that may be victimized by our pride because we can't see it in ourselves. See, part of the reason we can't see it in ourselves is because we associate pride with over-arrogance. And most of us don't see ourselves as over-arrogant. And so we miss this idea that we could be having a problem with pride. It's insidious. It works itself in there in our lives. So we're going to work for this series of how to bless and release our pride. See, we're not a kill the ego community. We're not a kill the pride community. We believe that both ego and pride actually have some benefits for us. Can we get that door shut? Thank you. We're starting out with our teens over here, and it's a challenge. So if I'm not screaming, which I don't usually do anyway, you'll know why. We're trying to keep the voice down, the noise down over there. All right. So we're gonna make sure first, before I go on, that we're all on the same page as to what pride is. Pride, and here's the thing. I don't even need to tell you because you all know. Really what I'm doing is just reminding you that we're all on the same page about this thing called pride. All of you could touch and agree inside your own soul, inside your own heart, and you know exactly what it is that pride is. First thing we want to remember about pride is it always diminishes us. See, and that's kind of counterintuitive because we think that pride builds us up, makes us bigger and badder and greater in our lives. But actually, pride makes us smaller. It diminishes our capacity. Pride diminishes our capacity to admit what we need to admit. Pride diminishes our capacity to acknowledge what we need to acknowledge. Pride diminishes our capacity to apologize when we need to apologize. You know, we've all had that experience. You know, you've been in your house with your beloved, and you know you were wrong. And maybe they're over there at the kitchen, and they're cooking, and nobody's saying nothing because there's just this thing in the air. And you know you were wrong, but you can't bring yourself to open your mouth and say, I was wrong, I'm sorry, I apologize. And so you just leave that going. What causes that in us to not apologize? Pride does. You've all ridden in a car and it's been totally silent because one of you has said something totally ridiculous. And you know all you need to do is acknowledge and apologize for it. But no, you're just driving in the silence. Nobody's talking about anything. What keeps us from doing that? Pride keeps us from doing that. It keeps us separate from the people that we love the most and the people we don't even know in our lives. So we need to begin to know that when pride diminishes us, it's like handing the remote control to our life over to somebody else in our lives. We deprioritize every single person in the room. We deprioritize every single person in the room, in our life, in our work room, in our homes. Everywhere we go, we begin to deprioritize. But along with everybody else that we deprioritize and shut out because of pride, we also shut God out because of pride. See, we think it's our intellect, but it's not. It's our pride that shuts God out. Psalms 10 says that the prideful man has no thoughts of God, has no room for thoughts of God. See, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody who says, I hope to get so prideful. I hope to get so prideful that nobody likes me. I hope to get so prideful that nobody loves me. My kids don't love me. My partner doesn't. No, we don't say that. See, it kind of creeps up on us, this thing called pride. So how do we unpack it? How do we recognize it? How do we bless it and release it? Well, one way, and it's only one way, is to follow Jesus. When we follow Jesus, we unfollow pride. Now, before everybody's hair on the back of their neck stands up, because I didn't come to a Christian church, and I don't know why she's talking about Jesus again. I don't know what she's doing. Okay? Just put your little hairs back down. Because here's the thing. Jesus was never a Christian. Jesus was born a Jew, lived a Jew, died a Jew. But if we are willing to follow the chronicled life of Jesus, whether it's the true life or not, I don't care. Because there's so much nourishment in the chronicled life of Jesus for us. If we are willing to follow the chronicled life of Jesus, we are willing to unfollow pride in our lives. Now, I could have used Buddha. I could have used Lao Tzu, because they are humble people as well. But we're more familiar. And next week, I think I am going to probably use one or more of those. But this week, you know, Jesus, the greatest of all of the disciples, he washed the feet of his disciples. He was a humble man. He brought a radical version of humility to the planet. When the children wanted to talk to him, and the disciples said, hey, you don't have to be time to be talking to kids. You got miracles to do. You got work to do. You got people to turn here. He said, don't be silly. Of course I have time. Of course I have time. I'm a humble man. See, that's what it means for us to be able to take that remote control back in our lives. Jesus brought a whole new idea to the planet. You know, when Jesus arrived here on the planet, the important people were either religious people or they were political people. That's who were important in the world. Nobody else was important. Nobody else could achieve greatness. The way you achieve greatness was to be a religious person or a political person. And Jesus brought a whole new idea. And what he said is this: to achieve greatness is to serve someone else. That's to achieve greatness, is to serve other people. And we know that. You know that every time you've helped somebody else, it felt much better than the day the paycheck arrived. Now, don't get me wrong, you want the paycheck, you need the paycheck, but that's not what made you feel good. What made you feel good, what made you feel great, was to be helping somebody else in this life. Now, I want to be careful here because this is a slippery slope I'm on. In this church, if you want things, we want you to have things. We're not a church that doesn't believe in materiality. We believe in it. We want you to have the car you want to have. We want you to have the house you want to have in the neighborhood you want to have it. We want you to have the job you want to have. We want you to have the vacation that you want to have. We want you to have all of those things. But we want you first to know that they came from God, that they were sourced from God. Because when we do that, we begin to infuse humility into it. We begin to infuse the understanding that we are spiritual beings living in a human body in our lives. Jesus said this. He could have said, you know what? The meek is the new black. Meek is the new black. Could have said that. Because what he wanted to know is, he said it like this. He said it, the meek inherit the earth. The meek inherit the power. They're not doormats. Meek people aren't doormats. They have that internal power, and they know it. They absolutely know it. Jesus was an initiator of reconciliation. And that's what meek people do, who understand they have an internal power, who have begun to integrate the spiritual self and the human self. He was an initiator of reconciliation in this life. See, pride says wait. Humility says initiate now. Pride says, I'm not going to call my sister who I haven't spoken to in 10 years, and we had a fight, and I don't really know what the fight was about, but I know it was something. That's what pride says. Humility says, I don't care what she did. I miss her. I want to call her now and talk to her now. See, pride says wait. Humility says initiate in this life. And if we could just begin to do this, and you know, I say this so often, the mind that is in Christ Jesus is in us as well. And we can do these things and more yet than we can do. We can become the initiators on this planet in all of your relationships, the ones in work. Some of us have irksome things that went on with coworkers, and we just sort of shun them. And why do we do that? We do that because of pride. What if we just initiated some reconciliation? Sometimes people do things to us, and we hold on to it with such a grip. And why we do that is because we are right. We're right. What is right? It's pride. It's just keeping people out. You know, my heart bleeds for Baltimore this week, but not only for Baltimore. In each of these areas, including Sacramento. If you have seen Authentic Voices, you've heard some of the stories of cast members, of our beloved John Waller being stopped right here. Why? Because he's black. I read a story in I don't know, somewhere, where it said that $6 million was paid out by the Baltimore Police Department in police brutality cases. $6 million. Do you know what that would have done in 4 years? Do you know what that $6 million could have done for that neighborhood, for that school, for new books, for hot lunches, for special tutors? $6 million. Now, before we get all, they're bad and we're right, and they're bad and we're wrong, let's understand something. If we go with humility, if that community could have met each side with humility for the discussions of what needed to happen, maybe that $6 million would have been spent differently. This church is going to begin some discussions on race and reconciliation. I'm reading a book now called The New Jim Crow. And I'm going to have books out here next week. And then in June, some Sunday, I'm going to invite you to come after you've read it. I'm going to invite you to come, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about it out loud. We're going to make mistakes with each other. We're going to go ahead and say things that are in our hearts, so we get them up and we get them out, and we begin to talk about what's going on here. Because we cannot continue in this way any longer. We have to initiate reconciliation. But in order to do that, you've got to put your pride away. You can't be like, I know everything. You've got to put your pride away and say, I'm going to come here with a beginner's mind, with an open heart. And I'm just going to see what comes up after I read this book. All right. So we're going to end today, and I'm going to ask you 3 questions. And I want you to work with these 3 questions every week, and then you come back next week, and we'll talk some more about this idea of pride. It's funny, you know, I heard this talk, this talk with a guy named Andy Stanley. He's one of my favorite guys. And I heard this talk about pride from him, and I thought, you know, that wasn't too uplifting. That was kind of like, oof, I got to look at some stuff. But here's the thing. You and I, in order to advance spiritually, I could come here and say God is good all the time. I could say it in 50 million languages in 50 million different ways. But until we get to the gunk inside of us, until we look deeply enough and say, oh, yeah, oh, okay, all right. So now don't disappoint me by not coming back next week, because I'm going to talk about pride. Don't go to one of the other New Thought churches and think, oh boy, maybe they'll talk about how to make some money. I don't know. Maybe. You come right back here, all right? I'm going to take attendance next week, so right back here. All right, the first question is this. How does pride manifest itself in me? Now, remember, we're not talking about the over or arrogant pride. We're talking about that kind of pride that keeps us from and causes us to. How does that manifest in me? Now, if you give yourself an honest look and you still don't know how pride manifests inside of you, you get a couple people together, maybe your family, maybe it's friends, work people, and you say to them, I'm doing this little thing at church. Don't tell them what church, though, okay? I'm doing this little thing at church. How does pride manifest in me? Now, they won't say anything, but if they start looking at each other like this, you know you got some work to do, okay? So you got some pride. Number 2 is, how does pride masquerade as me? How does pride masquerade as me? Is it in my intellect? Do I throw my intellect around to make other people look smaller? Do I use fashion? Do I use a commitment to excellence? Now, you'll notice none of those things are wrong. Your intellect is good. Fashion is fabulous. Commitment to excellence is important. But, you know, you can slide it over so that it becomes a prideful thing that you use against somebody else, to push somebody else in your life out. See, if we're using, well, never mind. I'll go there next week. Number 3. How much longer? How much longer, you ask yourself? Am I willing to give the remote control to pride? How much longer am I willing to delay what I need to do in terms of apologizing to somebody, in terms of acknowledging something? You know, I saw a video the other day, and it was a video of a little boy who played the piano, and his father very much wanted him to play baseball. And this kid, you know, you don't know what kids are going to be when they're 7, 8, but he looked like he might be gay at some point in his life, and his dad might have picked up on that and wanted him to be a man, wanted him to play baseball. And it was very, very painful for him and he would never go to any recitals. And the kid was a very good pianist, but the dad would never go to any recitals. Why did that happen? Pride. Pride. Not in the kid, in himself. It was a reflection of who he was. See, this pride thing keeps us separate. So we have to ask ourselves, how long are we willing to give the remote control? Is it a year? Is it a month? Is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Because it could be 10 years that we're willing. I see people frequently in my office who've had estrangements for family members for many, many, many years. And I will tell you that half the time they're not entirely sure what happened. But they know something happened. So those are the 3 questions that you have. Let's take this message into prayer, knowing that there is one power. It's the power of love. It's the power of harmony. It's the power of serenity. It's the power of adventure. It's the power of opening up. That's the power we have. The power to receive our good, not grab our good, not manipulate our good, but just to receive our good. That's power. That's humble power. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.